2025 is literally right around the corner. We are in October, we have November, and then December. And most of us have a desire to start the new year off either as our ideal self or fully into that version of ourselves. The process of becoming that version of ourselves, sometimes that's where we have the most trouble. Deciding who we want to be and how that version of us will show up in the world, speak to people, allow people to speak to them. And so we put it off until the new year. And then when it happens, we don't know how to maintain that. Even when we get the life that we desire, the process of maintaining what we've asked for, the blessings or the manifestations in our physical realm, is so difficult for some of us that we actually sabotage it before we can actually see it grow in our now. So this video is to talk about not only how to start the new year off in the best way possible, but it's also about how to speak to people, because we are coming into the holiday season and there are many of us who are trying to separate ourselves from toxic people in our lives, whether they are family or friends, and we don't have the courage yet or the system in place to not have anything to do with these people, or there's guilt, or we're not exactly sure how it's supposed to happen. And so sometimes there will be conversations that we don't want to have, that until we fully step into that version of ourselves that does not have anything to do with these people or does not allow access by any of these people, there are going to be things that we need to practice in order to be comfortable with standing up for ourselves, for holding our boundaries while we're transitioning into that new version of ourselves. So today we're talking about literally starting the new year off now, what to do to create that version of yourself, to see her or that space be fully realized, and also what to say to people as we're transitioning. And these are the toxic people that typically we struggle the most with standing up for ourselves, whether that is family for you or that is coworkers, friends, whoever it is, past lovers, people you want to break up with, it doesn't matter. So the first thing is that when things start to go really well for you, when the things that you desire start to actually show up, and you have, typically we have almost like that ideal step, that version of us planned out in our mind, but we don't have the next steps planned out. We don't know what kind of person we need to be in order to maintain the blessings that we have in our life. And when things start to go well, a lot of times we have these negative thoughts that remind us of why it shouldn't be us that has those things. And the first thing is going to be to counter those negative thoughts, to literally say that it is safe for you to have that. It is okay for you to say, I deserve these things or I desire these things. A lot of times there are past versions of ourselves that needed to survive, to protect ourselves, and the way that they thought is exactly what kept them safe. So if in your household, positivity was always followed by something negative happening, an argument or a fight or things falling apart, or when you did well and the attention was on you, that meant that somebody else felt like the attention was taken from them. This also is not necessarily associated with toxic households. Sometimes we believe that when we think of toxicity or toxic households or homes in which trauma has occurred, we think of the most extreme examples, and you could be dismissing traumas in your own life because they don't fit the narrative of what you have seen presented in the news or on TV. You could have a household in which things went very well. Your parents had more than enough and they took care of you in a way that allowed you to strive in many areas of your life. You could have grown up in the idyllic environment with two parents and both of them had great jobs. You guys went on vacations. Like, you could have had the life that a lot of people desire to have, and yet there was something lacking. It could have been that your parents put so much pressure on you to be this version that they had for you that there was no room for you to identify who you were as an individual. You could have likewise grown up in an environment in which there was toxicity, where it was a single parent household, where either it was your mother or just your father, and the dynamic was so skewed because your parent was constantly working, or you could have had a parent who was committing emotional blackmail, emotional incest, in which they were asking for you to literally step in as the missing parent. So for you, in those environments, in both, where a positive thing would happen, where you would do well on something, and the reaction was not one that fostered happiness or openness in your household. So when you go out into life and you start to achieve certain things, for you, your brain, your subconscious is almost waiting for the drop, waiting for the negative thing to happen. So you freeze. You don't allow yourself to fully immerse and relax in that moment, to celebrate that moment, because negative things are going to follow. So that hiccup is where we want to actually hone in on. We want to find out, literally by talking to yourself, about why past versions of you feel like that is still necessary for now. When we have separation between who we desire to be versus who we believe we actually are, there is a hiccup. There is something in there that we need to explore more. A lot of times it's going to be a simple thing of when you were 6, this is what typically happened. And then again, when you were 12, that was repeated. And so you've had moments in your life where it literally reinforced the idea that you currently use as the building blocks for your self-talk, for your desires, for how far you stretch past your family, if you stretch far past your family, what jobs you choose, if you choose jobs. All of that is going to stem from versions of ourselves who remember this needing to be part of how they survive. And when we unpack these things and we leave them, we're allowing ourselves to shift our mindset about ourselves and what we believe is possible. And again, I did have a comment where someone was asking me about like changing the way that you view yourself and not using therapy. And again, therapy is actually a very good tool. However, therapy is not a magic pill. And again, I've always said this, but therapists are just people. They are humans like you and I. They just have more training in certain areas, or they've chosen to travel down a path in which their education allows them to have access to more information in certain areas than maybe you do. But that doesn't mean that they are not flawed, or they don't have their own biases or things that they apply in situations that aren't applicable. So when we use therapy, we want to make sure that we remember first and foremost that you are actually in control. Just because you pay this person doesn't mean that they're in charge, or that the direction that your therapy goes in is going to be 100% determined by them. Because if you want to talk about something that you think is affecting you the most, that's the thing that you need to start with. Even if that's not the underlying thing, if that's the thing that's going to help you gain access to that information, that's helpful. However, if therapy is a path you've traveled down and it doesn't feel like it helps you because the person wasn't listening, or the things that you desired to talk about they didn't want to talk about, or you felt like something was supposed to happen and it didn't, a lot of times it's because our idea of what therapy is versus what therapy actually is a little bit skewed. And I have had this experience myself where I believed that this person that I'm talking to, I'm supposed to offload a lot of things, and then these epiphany moments are supposed to happen. And oftentimes they don't. They're in your everyday life. They're while you're washing dishes, and the smell of the soap reminds you of a time when your parent, said something to you and that stung. You want to sit in that moment and understand why that was painful for that version of yourself. And then you want to walk back and remember that, first of all, you're not in that same situation. And you also want to revisit sometimes painful memories from this new perspective, because you'll be able to see that maybe you didn't see it as clearly as before. Maybe you internalized something far deeper than you were meant to. And when we allow ourselves to release from those perceived traumas, whether they were legitimate traumas or they were internalized as traumas, because again, as children, we blame ourselves for a lot of things, including our parents not being together, or, the fact that we didn't have enough food in our household. We could somehow make that about ourselves if our parent was saying, you're selfish because you're eating too much. There are so many things that we can perceive as traumas, and we can internalize and make about ourselves when they actually weren't. So when we revisit things as an adult or in a new, healthier space where we're separated from the things that once really crippled us, we could find that we're stronger than we were at those points. And so the ability to unpack it is actually more powerful and more potent than it was before. The next thing is that when you're deciding this version that you want to be, it's going to be in alignment with who you actually are at your core. Even if, let's say, you desire to have a life that has more wealth and more luxury than you ever knew or experienced in your life. That is not you being fraudulent. That is you connecting with a version of yourself that does actually exist. The life that I have right now, I literally live in an environment that was nothing like what I grew up with. I have pigs, and I did not grow up. The most I had when I was a kid was fish. And yet this is more me than I have ever experienced in my life. And so the version of you that you desire, it doesn't necessarily have to align with what you've experienced in your life. However, when we're trying to become that version of ourselves, there are steps we have to take in order for that version of us to actually come into fruition. When we start to imagine what that version of us is going to look like, the version you are now, especially if there is a massive shift between where you are currently and where you desire to be, that friction can cause you to derail in the image making of that new version of yourself. You can say to yourself, okay, let's say you desire to have a certain level of income or live in a certain neighborhood, right? But the environment that you're currently in looks nothing like that other environment. And you and your family or people around you have ideas on what people in that neighborhood look like. Whether that is you, again, depending on where you come from, if you're desiring to be in a neighborhood that isn't seen as affluent or as nice as the one that you currently live in, or you want to go to an environment that is nicer than the one that you currently live in, you can have, even if the people around you, let's pretend you haven't even told anybody around you, but even if you think the people around you are going to say certain things, those thoughts that come into your mind are going to derail you from even envisioning, even imagining how good it can be when you get into that new space. As those fears come up, right, when I talk about regulating your nervous system in order to literally connect to your intuition, in order to literally connect to your truest, highest self, when those feelings come up of, wait, but we shouldn't be living in an environment like that, you want to stop. Because is that even your thought? Is that even who you actually are? If there is a desire to be that version of yourself, there is something within you that wants that. And you want to acknowledge that it is safe for that version of you to desire that. And sometimes it's as simple as, again, what I do is internally have these conversations of why am I feeling that way? But you might be at a place where even the thoughts are racing too much and it makes you feel uncomfortable. So you want to write it down. And you want to write down what you believe so you can actually see it and where in the world it came from. So if, for example, there were versions of me that believed that you only got a certain number of good laughs in life. Like, I have no clue why I believe that. And I believe it's because I just didn't laugh this much in relationships or in my everyday life. But I love laughing. I love gut-wrenching, full bending over, can't control your breathing laughter. And I really believed, like, there were versions of me that actually believe it wasn't possible to have that every single day in your life, that somehow there had to be pain, there had to be sadness. Don't get too happy because it is going to fall apart. So when I started to even flirt with the idea that my partner could be someone who was a source of my happiness and my joy and my laughter, that was really strange for my body to even get used to. And as you're trying to navigate those emotions, you want to pay attention to where that comes up. Do you have a pain in your stomach? Does it feel like anxiety in your body when you're thinking about the version of you that lives in that environment or has so much joy in her life? What is she afraid of? And is that version of you that would be afraid? Or is it the current version of you or the past versions of you in which your life reinforced the idea that it wasn't safe to have those things? So the next thing is that as we're transitioning, inevitably there are going to be people who do not want to see us stretch too far, especially if you were the kind of person that, I don't want to say allow people to be like this. I want to say that you were struggling with navigating your boundaries, how to establish your boundaries, right? And these people are going to come back as they see you stretching farther than what they deemed possible for you or what they wanted for you. They're going to come back and try to pull you back into those spaces in which they felt they had control over you. Now, I've told the story about the man who literally said to me he wanted to knock me down a couple of notches, and that man was an idiot. Except I truly believed in what he was saying because it mirrored what people in my life had said to me before. So when I got rid of this fool, I still had people in my life who mirrored what that individual said. And their behavior was structured in a way to put me back into the box that they deemed I should have been in. So when we talk about what to say to people like this, what exactly do you say in scenarios in which they are emotionally blackmailing you? You want to understand first and foremost that people expose what they're insecure about when they talk to you. So if someone comes up to you and they're insulting you for the way that you look and it's unsolicited, you're not saying anything negative to them, or you're not even in a conversation in which that should have come up, they're highlighting the fact that they're insecure about the way you look, whether it is that you are a woman or a man, or you identify as something else. It doesn't matter. Most of the time, people are exposing themselves when they insult us. And I've given this example before. I don't know if I've done it on these videos, but where a woman literally said to me that she felt like pretty people were dumb, and so she was happy that her daughter was smart. And that was designed to be an insult to me, but I heard that you think your daughter is ugly and that you find me attractive and you have to find something about me that makes you feel better about yourself. Now, I felt sorry for that little girl. That's what I thought. And because I didn't find this woman attractive, it's not like my feelings were hurt because I wasn't invested in her opinion of me. But when it's family, it's different. Not because we're invested in their opinions, but because they were there from the beginning. This is why I say we're not attracting these people, because our family was just there. We didn't choose them. They were just there. And the way that psychology works and the way that our minds are programmed is that what we consider normal is what we continuously experience or desire to experience in our life. That doesn't mean that that's all you're attracting. It means that what is available, what you see as possible for you, is going to come back to that blueprint that was first established by somebody else other than you. So some examples of things that, family members or people who were in my family, what they've said to me. A lot of times I notice that toxic people love to play the death card. They love to talk about how, you should hang out with them for the holidays because, God forbid, we all die. And this is the only holiday we have left. Now, obviously, death is not something that we joke about. It's not something that we find funny. However, if that is the only thing that somebody has over you when they're mistreating you, we want to put it in perspective. First of all, there are how many other days of the year that we don't see each other? One day is not going to somehow make that moment or the toxicity of this relationship more palatable. So when someone in my life used to do this, several people actually, but when it was from a person who was in a position of authority, I would just say to them that they would like to use that if they died, then somehow the other people that I don't want to talk to, that they were sad that we wouldn't have a relationship. And I would say to them that those people, I don't have a relationship with them for a reason, because their behavior is inappropriate. And I have constantly asked you to not talk to me about them. My relationship is with you. And if you cannot respect those boundaries, then I'm not talking to you. This is exactly the way that I had to say it to these people, because there is a point when you will have to realize that there is no respect for your boundaries. There are no desires to make you feel comfortable. And I remember watching this video of a man who has been diagnosed with narcissism, who literally said that he treats people the way that they allow him to treat them. And that has to sink in for those of us who are not the toxic, narcissistic people in our lives, that a lot of these people, in their mind, you're accepting this behavior and therefore it is acceptable. And I teach my kids this, and so I'll tell it to you. Bullies are cowards. People who bully you take it to the extent that we are, I'm not going to say allowing as if we are victim shaming, because we are not. I want you to understand how afraid these people are of you standing up for yourself. And I'm talking very toxic people, people who in my own life, their behavior got them arrested. Even those people were very afraid for the day that I stood up for myself. And I want you to see how the systems, the structure, the family dynamics surrounding these people that allow them to grow into these big bullies, even those people are afraid for the day that you stand up for yourself. And while you're trying to find the courage, part of you is going to have to unlearn the belief that it is not okay or safe for you to stand up for yourself. Now, again, I don't know your situation, only you do, so you have to use your discernment while you're watching these videos and to recognize that I am not telling you to do something that you internally feel is going to make you feel unsafe, but it is important for you to come back to a reality in which you have rights as a human being. Another thing that I experienced very heavily was family members who would just lie, make up scenarios in which they were a victim of someone's, and they would use that as a method to get me riled up, to stand up for them, to fix things in their life. And I always noticed that the person or the people who used to do this, they loved phone calls. They loved getting on the phone because then they could cry and you could hear the sadness and they could make their voice crack and all this crap. And what I had to start doing was not answering the phone. I had to start allowing them to send me a text message and saying to them that I'm not getting on the phone with you. And that prevented me from hearing forced, rehearsed emotional behavior in order for me to see it clearly and then decide whether or not I wanted to emotionally attach myself to this individual or this situation. And 9 times out of 10, I didn't. I had situations where people were constantly asking me for money and I would just say, I don't have it. There are ways in which you can express your boundaries without feeling guilty, but they are going to stem from you. They are never going to come from these people. They are never going to give you permission to stand up for yourself, to distance yourself, to isolate yourself. And it's hard when you're going through it because it feels wrong, because we were programmed to believe that that is wrong. But the more you distance yourself from people like this, the more you're able to see and hear your own voice and your own desires. And then the people that you interact with, they are more in alignment with that version of you that you desire to be. Another thing is that when we are struggling to stand up for ourselves against very toxic people, a lot of times the people who are most in alignment with who we desire to be, the people who love us the most, the people who care for us and want to see us thrive, those people are still pouring into us at the same time that we're trying to unpack and separate from the people who literally work to destroy us. And while that information is bombarded at you at the same time, it's conflicting and you don't know what to believe. And as much as you hear the kind words and they're like a soothing hug when you're really sad, the pain of what those people say, because it mirrors what you believe is normal, you are going to accept that. And so that moment, right? Again, we talk about who we desire to be, who versus who we think we are. That friction in the middle, that's where we're struggling to just accept the positive things that people are saying to us. And that's what you want to work on. You want to work on when I say to you that you are beautiful, that you are smart, that you are capable, that everything you desire to be in this world, you can. See how that feels in your body. if that feels real to you or if that feels uncomfortable and therefore a lie. When we sit and we just say, pause the video and just repeat that in your mind, that I am smart, that it is true. And the version of you that doesn't believe that it's true, the part of you, the memory that comes up that says, no, that's not real, that is what you want to unpack. That's how we shift. This is what we go to therapy for and sometimes don't find. And then we talk about inner work and we're not sure what it is or how to do it. It's that. It's as these thoughts of truth come in, do we allow them to sink in and literally, like fertilizer, water, nurturing plants, do we allow ourselves to receive that information in, or do we reject it because it doesn't align with the truths that we have believed to be our own? The next step is that we want to have a plan. As we desire to shift into these new versions of ourselves, nothing is going to happen from nothing. Action is what we're going to need to take. And we have to have a plan that feels palatable, it feels reasonable, and it feels actionable. And that doesn't mean we do all of the things at once right now only, because then we burn ourselves out and we feel uncomfortable with the fact that we're not doing everything. So you want to start small. You want to start in a way that feels real to you. So for example, for myself, I wanted to have a better nighttime routine, a better morning routine. But getting to bed on time was something I struggled with. But I can actually wake up on time. Surprisingly enough, getting up early is actually something that feels good in my body and easy to do. And when I feel the need to get up, instead of saying to myself, I should sleep a little bit longer, because I know what happens is it resets, my internal clock resets, and then I stay asleep much longer than I desire to. But I can get up early. And by getting up early, I'm moving my body earlier, I'm doing things earlier, and I'm getting more done throughout the day, and then I'm actually naturally tired at night. But I found that when I tried to focus just on getting to bed on time, that stressed me. It stressed me out, and then I was up longer than I wanted to, and then it's midnight and I still haven't fallen asleep, and then I feel like I've failed and I'm not doing what I wanted to. That's what we're trying to prevent. If you hear me saying getting up early is easy for me, and that makes going to bed easier, but you're better at going to bed than you are at waking up, that's what you want to focus on. Don't take what I'm saying as this is what you need to do. You want to hear what people are saying, even myself included, and say, does this apply? Does this help me? Should I use this? How does it feel in my body? Is it something I can use, or is it a tool that doesn't apply to me? When we come up with actionable plans, when we come up with steps, we want them to be baby steps. If you have a goal of losing a certain amount of weight or getting to the gym more or moving your body more, you want to break that down to the smallest goal. You cannot say tomorrow I'm going to lose 10 pounds if you haven't started. It's going to be overwhelming. But you can say, like what I do, I'm going to move my body more. Moving your body more is going to give you the ability to feel comfortable with that version of yourself that is more active. That version of you is going to want to fuel her body in a certain way. It becomes natural for you to eat certain things that maybe before you didn't. Sometimes just adding in one small thing every single week, like increasing your water, will make you go to the bathroom more often. It also will fill you more often. So you don't grab the snacks. But if you focus on the snacks first, that might feel overwhelming for you. That might not feel good in your body. So we want to have actionable plans that feel realistic and do not feel overwhelming for us. This is how we maintain the things that we manifest, the blessings that we have, the things that we desire. Because getting them is one thing, but being able to keep them going, that's where the magic is. And every day, these little habits, these little tasks, these little plans, they build onto themselves, and then they become the building blocks for success. The next step is your confidence. No matter what I tell you, if you don't have the confidence to believe that it's possible for you, you're never going to get there. And that's not to shame you or scare you. It's just to be realistic. We can only go as far as we believe we can go. Whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you are right. And when we have the confidence to believe that what we desire is possible for us and it's okay for us to have, then we really go much further than we ever imagined or dreamed possible. And our confidence, I've said this in my last video, they are from keeping promises to ourselves, and that is one big part of it. It's also when we look and feel the part of the role that we desire to play. So that version of you, if she looks a certain way, if she behaves a certain way, she dresses a certain way, you want to slowly start to show up in your everyday life now in the way that you desire to be there. Now, this can be a little bit tricky, right? Because if you're someone who looks a certain way based on your race, your culture, your lifestyle, your size, whatever it is that you deem makes it possible or not for you, you want to recognize that that may not be true. It could be that you believe that you shouldn't look a certain way because of the color of your skin, or because of your gender, or because of your lifestyle, or where you started out in life. And so as you desire to show up as that new version of yourself, depending on how she dresses, depending on how they look, depending on how their size, whatever it is, that gap, right, between who we are and who we desire to be, we want to unpack that. And in order for that version of us to be here now and that gap between the two to shrink, we want to take baby steps that feel comfortable and realistic for us. So that doesn't mean you change your entire wardrobe tomorrow if that is not financially within your budget, or mentally something that you feel comfortable with. Energetically, it does not feel aligned, but you want to start small. You want to start with certain pieces. Maybe you add them in slowly into your wardrobe, or you start to feel like it's okay for me to change my hair color or my hairstyle or the way I do my nails or the way that I dress in, different scenarios. That's going to make it almost like bite-sized pieces into that new version of ourselves that make our body, right? Because stress is going to be the first thing that prevents us, knocks us out of our alignment. We want to make it comfortable to be that person. And be clear, it's not the future version of you that is uncomfortable with that. It's the past version of you. So let's say that, eating a certain way was considered for other than you people, and you feel awkward about the fact that you desire to be that version of yourself that eats these things. It is not the future version of you that's uncomfortable with that. It's past versions of you. It is the younger versions of you that heard that that's for people who look like X, Y, and Z. That's not for people who look like you. And be very clear. We have parents, we have siblings, cousins, people in our environments who legitimately repeat this kind of stuff on a regular daily basis. So when we're trying to shift, it is going to be very loud. The part of you that says it is wrong. And nobody else. It's not always happening in your physical environment. A lot of times it's happening in our subconscious mind. And so the person we have to convince most is ourselves. The other thing is that, and I've said this before, but you are the occasion. Your life is the occasion. You do not need a birthday, a holiday to decide to put yourself together in a way that makes you feel good about yourself. You do not need the permission of a man or a woman or your parent or your cousin or anybody in your life to tell you that it's acceptable for you to look the way that you desire, to show up as that version of yourself daily or however you want to. And speaking to my mothers at this point, the idea that you cannot be that version of yourself because you're a mom is a lie. Mom guilt is very real. And what happens when we literally push ourselves back into a shell or into the shadow of our children because we're afraid of what people will think of me as a mom looking a certain way. Remember that your kids are a reflection of you. So how you feel about yourself, even if you're not saying it to your children, they will pick up on that. The way that our kids walk, a lot of times, they literally look like a spitting image of their parent. And if their parent is uncomfortable and they have their shoulders slump forward and they're trying to hide, your child picks up on those cues and believes that that's how they should show up in the world. And no matter how many times you try and convince them that they are beautiful and they are smart and they can be anything that they want to, it won't matter if they see you doing the complete opposite. This is why we cannot pour from an empty cup. And it is not bad for you to desire to put yourself together, to feel sexy in your body, to feel desirable in your body, in your life, in your physical space. It is not weird or wrong for you to want to be that version of you. The last tip that I have for you is as we are living in the now, in the version of ourselves, in that reality where we desire to be, the things that come up, the thoughts that come up that almost want to jolt us backwards, we want to keep practicing to be that version of us. So the person I am now, I've said this before, I had to believe that she existed in order for past versions of me to become her. And there is a version of me that I desire to shift into. And I have to believe that she exists. I have to trust that she is there and she is desiring for me to shift into that reality. And you want to surround yourself with people and things and reminders that it is possible for you to be that version of yourself. Visual or auditory cues that you see in your life and in your everyday existence in order to help you subconsciously naturally flow into that state. That can look like daily affirmations of that version of you that they would say to themselves, or the space that you desire to transition into. That can also be creating a vision board or some kind of visual representation, printing out examples of things in your life that you would desire to have. For me, that also looks like following people on social media or researching people who have similar paths that I desire to be on. They don't have to look like me, be the same age as me, same race or same background. None of that has to be similar to me, but the energy that I desire to switch into, to shift into, that's what I'm looking for. So women who are specifically living out their desired life path, that's what I feel inspired by. So I like seeing women who are navigating through that space in the same way. I also like to see women who are trying to unpack certain things within their own mental space that they want to shift out of, and watching them go through that process is very inspiring for me. So you want to find people or situations or things in your everyday life. Let's say there is, like again, that example I gave of the Four Seasons. Let's say you want to be in the Four Seasons mentality. You've never been to a nicer hotel and you want to go. If you had something that represented that for you, let's say it was a cup, or let's say it was, a picture or something like that, and you had that on your desk or in your space, and every day you saw it, if you sat down with that item and you thought about all the things that it represented for you, every time you saw it, you wouldn't have to remind yourself of what that thing represents for you, what it means for you. Your subconscious would just naturally connect to that. And all of those feelings and all of that energy would flow to you naturally. That's what we're trying to do. We want to make it so that our brain doesn't have the ability to, every time we go to do something, remind us of what we should have been doing or how we used to do things. We want physical reminders of things that we want to see in our life, desires that we want to have. That way, it becomes more natural for us to step into that space, to flow into that space. Because when we have flow in our life, we don't feel so caught up or hung up on every little thing. Again, it is natural and very human for you to have thoughts that derail you or shift you out of alignment. But what we want to do is, first of all, not shame ourselves for those moments when we're out of alignment, but we want to make it more natural to come back into alignment. So when you start to feel a little bit off or funny about what you're doing, you want to be able to say to yourself, it is okay for me to have had that moment. And what is that teaching me? I do the same thing where I have moments that shift me out of alignment, and I am making myself very aware of what it was that caused that, why I felt that. And I'm also giving myself kudo points for how I handled that situation differently than I would have in the past. Because that's, again, reinforcing the positive. The same way that these negative thoughts and behaviors were reinforced in our life. Let's say your parents told you something, and then everything they did, every moment in your life reinforced that. Let's pretend that your parents, it's surrounding money. Your parents said that we don't have money for that. You shouldn't ask for that. People who are spoiled ask for those things. That is a core belief that is now going to be imprinted in your mind. And then as you have memories or events that surround that idea, they get attached to that. And so it becomes part of your normal. So let's say you go to school and then they have a book fair and you can't afford book fair, it reinforces that initial thought. If you have friends who get new clothes and new shoes and it's not the beginning of the year, it's randomly in the middle, but you can't afford that, it reinforces that thought. It's not directly connected. It's not your parents anymore saying it, but it's almost like part of this thing that reinforces those core beliefs. So we're just shifting that core. We're shifting it away from things that don't help us feel in alignment. And again, when we're trying to shift our life to bring in a new us before the new year, that's what we want to be doing. We don't want to wait until the new year. We want to say at any point, I can decide I'm ready for a shift. You could be in the middle of July and decide that you want to change the trajectory of your life. You do not want to always wait until the beginning of the new year because you're putting things off that you really don't need to. And the more that we keep to the things that we desire to do, we keep promises to ourselves, we acknowledge that what we desire to see in our reality, that it is possible for us, that it is acceptable for us to have it, we are going to reframe the way that we engage with our reality and the way that we engage with ourselves, first in our mind before it shows up in our physical. And that is going to be how you change your life and how you shift the energy in your existence to bring about a new desired reality that not only is something you want to have, but helps you flourish and unlock new paths and opportunities available to you.